All right. Well, that situation,
Unfortunately,
is what it is right now. It's unfortunate, that the cameraman and the reporter were killed. Hopefully they'll find this guy soon. Like I said, it's going to be all over the news for the rest of the day in the next few days. And there are other operations that'll cover this more in depth and better than what we can do.
Sure.
But I just felt we should acknowledge it since it just recently happened. And doing what we do, this kind of show where we talk about more of the fun stuff and the things that a lot of people aren't spending too much time on to get people engaged and try new things and things like that. You kind of, in a situation like this, you got to take a step back and say, look, we got to address this.
Sure.
This is you can't ignore this kind of thing.
It also shows, I think, that just how tenuous your life is. That woman did not get up in the morning, go to work, start interviewing this other lady.
No.
The thought never even crossed her mind,
That
she might even get hurt.
Yeah, that she was putting herself in a position to even get hurt, let alone shot.
That everything cosmically came together for this whoever this guy is, this unhinged lunatic, to shoot her for no reason.
Right.
Likely no reason.
Well, we'll like I said, follow the news and everything to see how this develops and if they eventually catch the guy. Let's switch gears here and lighten it up a little bit. Let's talk to our pal Kevin Smith. Kevin's on the phone. Kevin, how are you, sir?
It's very important, good morning, number one, very important based on that story, that everybody lives their life, not just today, but every day, like it's their last. And I don't mean it's your last day, so go crazy. I mean
loot them all.
You leave you leave a house, you say goodbye to somebody that you like. You say goodbye. You don't take for granted, I'm going to see him in a couple minutes. You never know. So I try to live my life. I don't live my life like I'm going to leave the house and going to die, but, there's a chance. You never know what's going to go on. So I try to keep things good with everybody in case of a moment like this. Even when you get in, fights with your friends or whatnot, you try to end it quick because I don't always think hey, there's somebody out there with a gun who could take us out, although it is America, so that thought is always in the back of my head. But there's, you can get in a car accident, and a comet can hit the earth. You just never know when you step outside the door, or even if you're in your house, what's going to happen. So don't hold grudges. Don't sit there and be like, oh, I've got a long-standing feud. It's just a waste of time. This poor woman and that poor cameraman got up this morning and we're just like, oh, we're going to go do a job. And isn't this great? We don't have to really work for a living. We get to do this, and it's news, but it's kind of this light news, and let's go do our jobs. And won't be back again because some animal kind of whipped out a gun and decided to take things one step further than anybody else has ever taken them. So, I mean, you can't safeguard against that. I'm sure you can put a bunch of laws into place that might help, but you can't safeguard against crazy. So you've got to be prepared in life, man. Be prepared and make sure you're always good with everybody, man. It sounds like a ridiculous thing to say if I'm a 45-year-old man. Call your mother. That's what I get out of that story is man, I hope those two people got to talk to their parents before this whole thing happened. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah,
but I
terrible.
appreciate you guys bringing me on right after that. It's a heartbreaking story. I heard I'm sitting here on the phone going you're kidding, and I'm reading along online. I had no idea. It's terrifying. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but that's a terrifying story. I heard you guys talking about copycats, but that's the thing that would alert me the most is somebody somewhere is watching this going, oh, you could do this? I never thought of this before.
Yeah.
And, maybe there's a problem there. But I'd rather light a candle than curse the darkness, so let's step away from that. And I just want to throw out a compliment. I was listening to Bryan Johnson broadcast. That's a radio man right there. That dude should have, as long as I've known Johnson, man, he's a dude I always felt should have a radio show because he was kind of the Howard Stern of our bunch. Not only did he listen to Stern religiously and whatnot back in the day when we were kids, but he was the guy that would talk about his life in that way that, the best talents on radio would open up about themselves, and you'd fall into that hole going oh this person sounds just like me. One of the reasons I started hanging out with Johnson in the first place is because I'm just such a weak-willed individual. I have no spine whatsoever, man. I know some people go, that's not true. You've got a lot of character. I got character, but that's not spine, man. I've never known who I am. I've spent my whole life trying to figure out who I am. And at 45, I'm still trying to figure it out. And some days I'm a podcaster, and some days I'm a director, and some days I'm a father or a husband. There's a lot of different plates to spin, a lot of roles to play. But I know my entire life, like, I've liked something, and if the crowd was like, that's stupid, I'm like, yeah, you're right, that's stupid, and I put it to the side because I'm weak-willed. But I've always been attracted to strong individuals who know exactly who they are. I gravitate toward those people because I try to steal from them and stuff. Johnson, one of those people. Johnson has always been one of those people that knows exactly who he is and never made apologies for who he was. Like, and not in this way of like, fuck the world, I'm in charge, but just like, I don't care what everybody likes. I know what I like and who I am. That distinctive sense of humor I have came from him. Like, you know, you guys never met Kevin Smith, the real Kevin Smith. Bryan Johnson did, but by the time you all met Kevin Smith, it was Kevin Smith plus Bryan Johnson's sense of humor plus Walter Flanagan's sense of righteous indignation plus sense of, you know, fucking let's talk about pussy. All of that aggregated into who I became. So when I was on hold, as horrifying as it was to hear about the Virginia story, I was just delighted to hear Johnson weigh in because I was like, my whole life I've been waiting to hear this guy on the radio because he was born to do it. That's why I was so happy when he started telling Steve Dave, because I'm like, this is what the man was born to do. Share his thoughts constantly and whatnot. He's one of the most interesting in that campaign, the most fascinating man in America or whatever, or the most interesting man in the world. Johnson, to me, has always been the most interesting man in the world. So I was so delighted that you brought him on this morning and had him in the studio, man. As a longtime Bryan Johnson enthusiast, Erik, I appreciate you having him on.
I think he's saying he's a fan.
Oh yeah, big fan.
I was happy to hear him say that because when he first said radio man, I thought he meant like the dude that rides a bike around with the radio on his neck.
Standing outside your window, like say anything.
The 80s boombox.
He meant a ham radio man.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brian's been on the show a few times now, and every time that he's come on, their fan base of Kevin Smith, the fan base of Tell 'em Steve Dave, and comic book men all just come right to the forefront there through social media and the phones. Brian has always been very entertaining, and he's looking down at the ground. I think he's not enjoying the fact that we're all
just like, why are they all talking about me? Why is it pleasant?
Go back to talking about him. Kevin, I wanted to ask you a question. Out in San Diego, I didn't get a chance to meet up with you. You were rather busy and stuff with your speech and everything. I mean, your Hall 8 show and everything else that you had going on. But one of the big things that did come out of San Diego was you had a vinyl figure made by... can you throw that over here? Thank you.
Art Asylum, Diamond Direct.
Yeah, by Diamond Select Toys here. And there was a lot of social media about it. Like they were placing the figure in different spots around the con and telling you where to go and get it. And I think by the second day, these were already gone. They were already sold out, along with that green Enterprise, which I don't know what that was. But we were looking at the figure here, and we were like, oh, this is pretty cool. And Kevin, last time he was up here, was nice enough to sign one that we're going to give away to somebody. But Brian pointed out, he's like, did you read the inscription in the back? And I said, no. And he goes... read it and tell me your thoughts on it. And I have to ask you, the description of your figure, did you have a hand in writing this or no?
Yeah, I wrote the text.
Oh, you did?
Okay.
Originally, the text was very, complimentary. Kevin Smith is, an accomplished filmmaker. It's very complimentary, very nice and stuff. But, when there's a figure of you, you're already a target where, people are like, you fucking fat jackass. How dare you be celebrated by somebody else?
Right. We were reading the inscription. I'm like, this looks like, all the critics of Kevin made their own toy and said, look what an asshole this guy is. Buy this toy.
No, I was happy to write that. Once I saw the original text, I was like, can I take a pass at it? Chuck's the guy that runs Diamond Select Toys, really great guy. And he was like, yeah, go ahead. And so I wrote that thing, and he was just like, boy, you don't like yourself. And I was like, no, I do. I just, in a world where they're buying a figure of me, at least try to give them a giggle or something like that. But my biggest objection to the figure is not that. It's if you look at the figure, it has no bald spot. I have a giant bald spot in real life. And when I look at that figure, he has a full head, like a lion's mane of hair. So I look at that little plastic toy with so much resentment because I'm like, this is a lie. It's not true.
Well, I think it's just paint, so I think it can be fixed with like a strong number 2 eraser or some nail polish remover.
I'm going to grab a Band-Aid, quote, flesh-colored Band-Aid, and just make a little yarmulke for him.
Were you surprised that this thing did so well?
I was delighted, man. I guess I was kind of surprised. I always assume that people are going to die with crate loads of our merchandise. Well, like years ago, after Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and Brian will remember this, Graffiti, who we made a lot of stuff with, Bob Chapman, another great guy. He does our little Buddy Christ statues and stuff. He wanted to do Blunt Man and Chronic figures, articulated leather coats or pleather coats and stuff, real hair. And we did them, and it was like by the time they were done, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back had already come and gone. It was on video. So Chappie had way more of these Blunt Man and Chronic dolls or action figures than he ever bargained for. And we are still selling those off. Like he was stuck with a bunch, and it's taken the better part of a decade to whittle down his stock. So that we learned on that figure not to print or make nearly as many. But it doesn't always sell. My stuff doesn't. Trust me, you go to any retailer and be like, "Hey man, does Kevin Smith's stuff sell?" And they'll be like, "Only if Kevin Smith buys it."
I bet the Cockknocker figure is selling quite well though.
It's got it, right? Like,
it's an awesome figure.
Especially when he's at the signings.
Yeah.
Totally. And you never imagine, it's a figure you never thought you'd really see, where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I've got a Cockknocker figure.
It goes beyond that. I was in the stash the other day, and my hand to God, I saw a father buying his 8-year-old daughter a Cockknocker figure. Now that's something I thought I'd never see.
She's got to learn somewhere.
Yeah,
it's little things like that, man. Like, I'll never win an Oscar, and why would I? But I got that. You know what I'm saying?
And that should be an extra on Comic Book Men.
Totally. That is a little moment. That totally could have happened on Comic Book Men. I wish that would have been shot. But little stuff like that makes it worth it, man. Where you hear a story about like some dad brought his 8-year-old kid, his daughter, a Cockknocker doll, and you're like, I've won in life.
It does give you hope for the world.
Yes.
I was just happy to see how well this thing did because, for these kind of figures, right now you're living in a Funko world where, they're dominating as far as vinyl, any kind of vinyl figure goes.
They're tremendous. Like, honestly, those Funko Pops might be the thing that drags me back into regular collecting because they just keep making them, and every one they make is like, oh, that's cool too. Oh, that's cool too. These would look amazing on my shelf. So yeah, they did Funko Pop did a Jay and Silent Bob, and they're beautiful. But I kind of dig what Chuck has done with these things. Are called, well, they make mini mates. These are called Vinny mates, vinyl mates or whatever. So we're doing a whole line. The first one is me. I think the next one is Jay. So there's a two-set. It's like podcast toys. We call it podcast action play set. So you can sit there and have the adventures of two dudes sitting at a desk recording. So I'm one. Jay is the next one. Ralph Garman is the next one. After that, I do Hollywood Babylon with him. And then I told Chuck, I was like, Chuck, tell them Steve Dave, they have their own army. Like, honestly, if you make 50,000, they will clean out 50,000. So the boys will be next as well. Tell them Steve Dave, which would be Brian, Walt, and Quinn.
Nice. You mentioned the mini mates, and we have a couple of them right here on the console, and we're looking at it, which we'll also give away later. It's signed by everybody from Comic Book Men. But I do have to ask why Brian had to buy his own.
It's a rite of passage. Every person lucky enough to get their own action figure should have to purchase it at least once. It's a rite, and it's a rare. That's breathing rare air, man. Think about it. When you were a kid, all the Star Wars figures or all the Batman figures, all the G.I. Joe figures, all the action figures or toys you ever had. And then you never sit there and go like, could you imagine if I was one? And one day this fool grows up and there's a Vinny made of him. There was also, we did the animated series.
The in-action figures.
The in-action figures, and as Steve Dave and Walt the Fanboy. So they've already been in figure form already. That was honestly like one of my proudest achievements in life. The day that Chappie was like, hey man, we're doing Brian and Walter. I was like, Brian and Walter are going to have figures? I dropped the mic. I'm done.
When I walked into the stash, I didn't even know they were making the mini-mates. And I walked in and I was like, oh my God, look at these. And my second thought was, I wonder what Walt's cost is, because there's no way he's giving it to me for his cost. But how much of a percentage is he going to get me for?
Yeah, it was. I remember the first person to find out, I think, after me was Ming, and he was obviously most excited. Mostly because his figure is like actual size, but that was, I think, for him. Like at least Brian and Walter, had the jaded kind of. We've had in-action figures of ourselves, But I don't think Ming and Mike ever imagined in a gazillion years there'd ever be a toy of them. So, they're ecstatic, Ming particularly.
I also, real quick, want to say that I love that Kevin's involvement with toys is growing, because not just the figure, but you did one of the boxes not too long ago. Like, I'm trying to remember. I think it was NerdBlock.
NerdBlock, yeah. I love that guy. I love that guy and his company, man. He started a Shirtpunch, which, now they offer like 4 different shirts a day, 24 hours. They got a clock, and you order it, and once it's gone, it's gone.
Let's admit why you like it, because it's a Canadian company.
Number one, it's Canadian, so I support all Canadian companies. But number two, what I love about it is I met the guy years ago. He's a great dude, and we've done stuff with him over the years. But he was this dude. I mean, I feel maybe I shouldn't tell his story, but I'll tell a smaller version of it. He was a guy who had a job, man. Like, he was going to school, and he was married, actually. And one day he was like, I love this idea of like changing T-shirts every day. I think I could kind of pull this off. And so he creates this thing where, he puts up a T-shirt design for 24 hours, and whoever orders it, he puts it on T-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, whatever. And so he does it, 1 or 2 times, and he gets a bunch of orders, like substantial amount of orders that he can't even process. And he realizes this could be a thing. And his wife at the time dissuaded him. She's like, well, I don't like this. We should just be going to school, not concentrating on this. And eventually told him, like, if this is what you want to do, I don't think we should be together. And he was like, I wound up losing my marriage, and not in a way of like, I'm going to steamroll over it. He was just, I just saw the future, and, she didn't want to go with me, I guess. So he built this company by himself with a couple friends. And all he did was sell just a different T-shirt every day, 24 hours. He'd find people online to do designs and stuff. Then he started adding more T-shirts, two a day. Now I think it's up to 4 a day. And then he diversified out with the NerdBox, which is, basically a subscription service. You join up, and every month they send you a box full of cool stuff. So I've watched this dude go from a guy who was like, I got a good idea to do a T-shirt online and sell it, to probably one of the wealthiest people I know at this point, and most prosperous. Like, I've watched a business go from nothing to so diversified. With the last conversation I had with him, he's like, in 2 years, I think we're going to be ready to start financing films. That's a guy that just chased his dream, to the point where, some people in his life, even the closest people in his life, were like, why are you doing this? But he felt the call and built something out of nothing. I love people like that, self-made like crazy. So I talked to that dude forever, man. He's a really, really good guy. And so the moment he was like, you want to curate a box? I was like, hell yeah. And I think I've done it once already, maybe 2 times, I think. But, I love NerdBox, Shirtpunch, man. I mean, there are lots of companies like that online. That's the one that we deal with the most. But, man, if you one day sit up and go, hey, man, I got a dopey dream that I'd like to accomplish, and you chase it down and make it real, you're my hero. You're my Batman. I don't care who you are, and I don't care if you've done it 20 years after I did it. Anybody does that, man, anybody's just like, I'm not known for this, and I'm not supposed to do this outside my box, but fuck it, I'm going to give it a shot, and builds it into something. Those are the only true pioneers we got left. There ain't nothing left to explore on this planet. We've seen everything and stuff. What's left to explore is who we are and what makes us tick, man. So anybody who does that, and it's not just starting a business, man. It's starting a dream business. Anybody that's just like, I want to do this, man. This would make me happy, and then turns it into their life and turns it into their lifestyle. And suddenly, one dude that dude can literally sit there and be like, "We're going to be producing movies in 2 years," and I fucking believe him, because I've watched everything happen now and stuff. I fully expect to be working for this man one day. So yeah, I dig that company, man. But I honestly dig any self-starter, man, particularly if it's remotely creative. Like, he's in the commerce business, sales. But what he sells makes all the difference. He sells what makes him happy and stuff like that. He loves making these shirts. He loves putting together the boxes, the toys and stuff. So that's kind of artistic. That's creative at the very least. And there's only 2 paths in life, kids. You got your destruction path, and you got your creative path. And that destruction path is as fucking crowded as the road, as the freeway at fucking rush hour, because throw a rock and you will hit any motherfucker who wants to destroy something. There is no end of people out there who will break shit for you. Very few people will make shit, man. And that road is clear. You could cruise for 120 miles per hour because very few people take that road. So anybody jumps over that road, man, wins my estimation, because when you step toward art, one step, art rushes at you and sucks your dick. It's that simple, man. Like it's and some people don't get that. Some people have the feeling of like, man, I would like to do something. I'm not just talking about acting or writing or singing. I mean anything remotely creative, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody else. If you're sitting there going like, what I like to create is death and destruction for others, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to people that want to make good in the world, man, make other people happy and make themselves happy as well in the process. So you sit there listening to people, you listen to us right now talking and going, hey, either they're interesting or fuck this fat asshole, I'm tired of him talking his stupid fucking hockey jersey and shit. You're absolutely right. Both sides of the coin are right. People that like me you're right, and the people that hate me are absolutely right. I'm talking to the people that hate me right now. For years you've been listening to people on the radio, not just me, but anybody, and you sit there in the car, you sit there at the office, go, I'm funnier than all these fucking assholes. I'm smarter than all these fucking assholes. Why am I listening to them? How come they're not listening to me? We live in a day and age where you could flip that script, man. This ain't the 50s, 60s, where it's just like gatekeepers decide what media you get to watch, meaning this goes on TV, this goes in a movie theater, this is on the radio, and we say what goes. Now it's democratized. Now you could jump out there, create your own show, put it up online, man. You create your own podcast. You could create your own fucking broadcast. For years you've watched TV or listened to other people. Now's a chance where you can do it yourself. It requires no but new equipment. You don't have to buy anything. It's not like being into hockey where you have to buy a bunch of fucking stuff. You got a cell phone, you got a studio. You got yourself the ability to record an entire show. Sit down with your friends, loved ones, or whatever the fuck, enemies even, and start creating, man, because you never know where it's going to go. Bryan Johnson's sitting there on the radio right now. He created that show, Tell 'em Steve Dave. A couple years later, this moment comes along where Comic Book Men happens. Like AMC is like, we want to do a show, a geek-related show, because we got this Walking Dead thing. It was the very first season. They're like, it's doing well. When the show is over, the audience will leave. We're afraid that the geek audience will go away, so we want to put things on the air that will keep that audience around until Walking Dead returns. And so that's how we got into the thing, man. They were like, do you guys have any ideas? And, you know, I was talking to this dude, Charlie Corwin, who runs Original Media, the production company that we co-produced the show with. And I said, dude, I don't have any ideas. I said, but, like, you know, if you wanted to do a cheap geek show, you should put a comic book. You should put a camera in a comic book store. You should do like Pawn Stars in a comic book store, man. And he's like, well, let me see if they like that idea. And he went to AMC and they liked it, and he came back and he's like, all right, man, they like the idea. We can kind of move forward. And I was like, well, what we should do is find the most acerbic comic book store staff in America. We'll do a nationwide search and go out and find a store, and the people that work there, people that work in comic book stores generally very smart, very funny and stuff, so we'll do a nationwide search to find out where we're going to shoot our show. So Charlie talked to AMC about it, and AMC is like, we'll give you $10,000 to shoot a pilot preview, which is like a fake version of the show. So, you know, I was like, well, how are we going to do that? Because we don't know who our staff of the comic book show is. What comic book store are we going to shoot at? And he goes, well, all we have to do is pick a store, you know, maybe East Coast, West Coast, and shoot what the show would be, and then we'll worry about that later. And I said, well, if we're doing that, I said, we could save a few bucks, man, if we shoot this show in my store. I got a comic book store in Jersey. And that's the first time in this 2-week process I ever mentioned owning a comic book store as I was pitching a comic book store show. And so they're like, really? And I said, yeah, I got one in Jersey. He's like, why did you never mention it? I was like, I don't know. I thought it sounded braggy. I said, but the dudes who are there, they do this podcast called Tell 'em Steve Dave. They're very funny. So we could use those guys as the stand-ins for whoever winds up being the real cast of the show. Like, they'll be perfect for this pilot thing. And so Charlie goes, he goes, can I hear them? Is there some place I can hear them? I said, yeah, there's a podcast they do, Tell 'em Steve Dave. I gave him 3 links to 3 episodes. And then Charlie calls me the next day, and he's like, you're a fucking idiot. This is the show. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, these guys are hysterical, man. They bicker like a married couple, man. It's like, they're really funny. They know this geek stuff like crazy. They work together in that store. I was like, yeah, they're you know, Brian and Walter have known each other for years. Brian doesn't work in the store. He used to run the store back in the day, but he just hangs out. He's like kind of Walter's like unofficial wife, if you will. And so they were his unofficial husband, depending on which day it is. And so they were like, well, we want to meet with them. And they came came down and met with the boys and fell in love with them. And so all of a sudden we were shooting this TV show, something that was never going to happen. If I tried to make it happen, if I was out there pitching a show set at Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash, it never would have happened. But because it was so like, well, I guess you could do this, or, hey, these guys would be great as stand-ins, they wound up being the fucking show, man. And that's only because Bryan Johnson had himself a podcast that somebody could listen to and be like, hey, this guy's funny. Let's use him in this capacity now, too. So you never know, man. When you take a step towards art, dude, you ask Bryan Johnson, he'll tell you, art rushes at you and sucks your fucking dick. He's got an action figure of himself now.
That he had to buy.
He sat around and talked. Just because he sat around and talked. Like, things are possible. You know, like when I was a kid, you'd hear people interviewed on a radio or watch them on TV, and they were people like Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill, or, you know, people who were Sean Connery, huge famous movie stars and stuff, and you would be like, well, I'll never be that because you have to be born into that or super talented or something like that. But now you live in a world, man, where you can become something high profile in the media without even going to school, man. This is Johnson, you didn't finish college, did you? Neither did I.
I did not. And we also didn't come from an environment where our parents were like, go for it.
Oh, no. I was raised in a house where my father, who I love dearly, was like, see that mountain? Never climb it. You know, very, very upfront. Matter of fact, we were not dreamers. We were not raised to be dreamers. The town, and I'm not putting down our town.
Stop achieving.
The greatest town to grow up in America was Highlands, New Jersey. Made us who we are. But it was not an encouraging bouillabaisse where people were like, you could be anything you want. Most people were just like, sit down, shut up, you're not this. You're going to be this forever. You live downtown. I live downtown in Highlands, so I was called like a clam digger and a scumbag most of my life simply because of geographical location in the town. But, you know, that made me who I am. I love that town. I still go back all the time. And with my mother now, particularly. Like, I drive around with my mother in Highlands because she loves it. Because I'm like, hey, this is where we did this. This is where we did this. And if you're driving around with your mother and telling her you remember everything she ever did with you as a child, that's like giving your mom a vibrator and a porno tape. It gets no better. She's like, oh, this is pleasure beyond pleasure.
It makes for a bountiful Christmas, too.
And an awkward Christmas.
Very awkward Christmas.
What you were just saying about the podcast stuff, and it's one of the reasons that, let me kiss your ass for a tiny bit here, that I've always admired what you were doing with the podcast stuff, because Smodcast, was one of the first podcasts to take off when the medium was really starting to, people were figuring it out and getting traction and whatever. And we used to actually have Smodcast for a while on this channel, and I've never not followed it. Like, I've been there since day one, and it's my go-to every week. I'm looking for stuff, but Kevin's always so busy that you're lucky once a month you get a Smodcast now.
Yeah,
but
this year's been bad. Scott got a job, like a real career. So he actually works more often than not. And so a few times, more this year than any other year, there have been weeks where he's like, I can't get over there. I can't do it. So I wind up putting up something else, or we don't put up an episode. But I love doing that show. Like, it was... We started it because, I was like, hey, we don't get to hang out anymore and talk and fool around like we used to, just joke and stuff because we're always working. Let's do this thing where we sit down once a week. I've heard of this thing called a podcast. Ricky Gervais had one. I hadn't heard it, but I heard what it was, and I was like, I like this idea, man. It's like doing a commentary track on a DVD or Laserdisc. There's just no movie. I said, so let's sit down and we'll talk to each other once a week, man. Just joke around the way we used to outside of work, got nothing to do with movies or anything. So we've been doing it now. We started in 2007, so it's been 8 years. And when we started, like, if you looked at the iTunes podcast chart, it was like us. It was This Week in Tech with Leo Laporte. It was, NPR. Bill Maher's, Real Time had its podcast after show podcast. Happy Tree Friends, the cartoons about the animals.
Oh, Happy Tree Friends is great.
So great. And that was the landscape back then. Like, it was, wide open and stuff. So we jumped in even before, like, Adam came over and before, Mark figured out, what his purpose in life was with WTF. It just appealed to me because I was like, wait, I can have my own show. Like, my whole life I've loved radio, man. Loved listening to the theater of the mind, word picture association. That's all you get with radio. It's not like, here's a picture and here's a series of pictures of cops chasing a villain or something like that. somebody sits there and tells you a story, man, just like when you were a kid, just like way back when we sat around fires and told each other what happened and stuff. It's oral tradition, which sounds sexy, but really, it means it's just kind of the talking and stuff. So I've always loved it, and the idea of, like, I remember when I was a kid, I was like, man, one day I would love to own my own radio station, with its own little antenna. There was a station near us called The Rat, which I was like, man, wouldn't it be great to one day own that? You get up and say whatever you wanted, get on the radio and just speak your mind and stuff. So when these podcasts were introduced, that right away I fell in love with that. I was like, wait, I can have my own show and I can just say whatever I want. I could do like what they've done on the radio forever. Oh my God, I'm in.
And you've had a lot of successful podcasts. I mean, between Smodcast, Fat Man on Batman, Hollywood Babylon is very popular. Touring with Jay Muse for Get Jobs, Get Old. And one podcast in particular that I want to touch on real quick that I've become a big fan on is Talk Salad and Scrambled Eggs.
That is, I love that podcast because it represents, like, I go out there and tell people, go record a podcast, before they figure out how to charge you for it or regulate it for the government, FCC's it, and you can't say whatever you want and stuff. I was like, there's no gatekeepers right now. It's like ham radio with personality. You can get out there and you can have your own show, get on a microphone, blah, blah, blah. So I like to encourage people to do it all the time. And I always use the example of, like, you don't have to do an entire podcast about all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You can just do one about just Leonardo, and you'll get to 100 episodes before you're like, Donatello was a bitch. And so it's just a dopey example of, like, you could talk about anything. This podcast, Talk Salad and Scrambled Eggs, is the living embodiment of that.
It's so ridiculous, but when you get a chance to feel it out and listen to it, you're like, why hasn't this been done before?
Me and Matt and Myra we'll sit down, and we've been doing it now. We just recorded episode 10. We were watching every episode of Frasier, two episodes of the show per podcast, and then just doing commentary tracks that nobody ever asked for. So the first half hour of the show, we don't really talk about Frasier. We just talk about everything else. And then when the show begins, we talk about Frasier, but we also talk about TV history and writing and why we do what we do. Matt, was transformed by the Dick Van Dyke Show as a kid because he was like, you could write comedy for a living? Like, these people sit around and they tell jokes to each other, and that's a job? And so he gravitated toward the entertainment industry based on what he saw, on the Dick Van Dyke Show. So he loves sitcom writing, is a big aficionado, and so the show winds up being really interesting. And on one level, you're like, well, I don't give a fuck about Frasier. If you're one of those people who's like, I don't care about fucking Frasier. Oddly enough, it's a show that will make you like Frasier because it kind of introduces, sometimes people hard sell you on something. We're not hard selling, man. We're just like, hey, we're going to talk while this is happening, and I bet you'll like this show too. And it's crazy. What's so satisfying to seeing all these young people on Twitter, people in their early 20s going like, I'm kicking back with Frasier. These fuddy-duddy sitcom.
You were born when that came on.
No doubt, man.
You were conceived to Frasier.
They were just cum stains when Niles made his first joke.
When you were saying about Matt and the Dick Van Dyke Show, I think that was the episode that I was thinking about where you guys talked for a while, then you started the episode, and then at one point you go, oh crap, there's 10 minutes left in the show. We haven't even talked about the plot and what's going on.
That's the best. I mean, that's the beauty of the podcast is you don't have to, there's no agenda. You wouldn't get that on the morning news. They're like, hey man, we got all these things we got to do. We can't screw around and stuff. Or even on a morning entertainment show, you wouldn't get that. But you can be so nimble in podcasting because it's free. Nobody's getting charged anything. So at the end of the day, you could always stand behind, what do you want? It's free. So in that way, you get to be experimental. You get to talk about whatever you want. And it's just, like everybody listening to this show for years, they know. It's like sometimes the recipe is so perfect, and you could just listen to four strangers talk for hours, and you won't even get out of your car. You're on your way, you're at work, and you're like, I'm supposed to be at work 15 minutes ago, but fuck, I want to hear the end of this conversation, man, because we love to hear people talk. We love to hear people exchange ideas and stuff like that. Yes, we like to watch things, and yes, we like to fuck, but we love to hear people and hear their ideas because it's how we figure out who we are. We gauge who we are against listening to others. Go like, do I feel like that? Am I that? Am I normal? Am I abnormal? And stuff like that. So once you're hearing a bunch of people that you identify with, as is the case often with this show, I've seen anytime I've gone on O&A afterwards on Twitter, people are just like, oh man, the conversation was perfect. You guys got it. It was magic. That was great radio. Like, I've been there. I've been the recipient of great radio, sitting in my car, listening and not going into my job because I'm like, man, this is like, it's entertaining me.
There's a whole movie set waiting, and Kevin's got a podcast in the car.
But yeah, I love that podcast because it typifies what the medium is all about. Talk about whatever you want, man. I can't believe there's a show that just talks about a TV show that hasn't been on the air in 11 years, but still, like, it's found its footing, it's found its audience. And we had this guy, Ken Levine, on last week, who was he's a writer. He wrote for Frasier, he's written for Cheers, like, he's written for the Jeffersons. That was his first job and stuff. And he was magic, man. I was never going to meet that guy unless we did that podcast. He came over and gave us such good content, dude. It was crazy. He had this amazing life where, aside from, like, writing for sitcoms, he wound up, like, doing baseball commentary for a couple different teams. He's a huge baseball fan. So he wound up being the voice of a couple teams. Like, isn't that nuts? Like, he was a little kid that loved baseball, and then one day he was like, I'm going to try it out. And he went to a ballpark with a tape recorder and sat in the cheap seats and just started calling games for himself until he got good at it. And then he sent in reels, and then one day he got picked up. Like, I love stories like that because I'm like, man, I never thought of that. Why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I become a baseball announcer? I hate baseball.
Kevin, we only have a few more minutes left with the show here. There's a couple people calling in, just wanted to ask some quick questions. Is that cool?
Oh, absolutely, please.
All right, let's go to Ronnie in Newark. Ronnie, you're on with Kevin Smith.
Hi, Kevin. I'm a big fan of yours. Been a big fan since the days of Clerks. I just wanted to know that I know you're making a Clerks 3. I want to know where the inspiration came to make another Clerks, because you inspired me to do my own comic book called How to Survive Working in Retail based off of the Clerks movie.
Oh, nice, man. Thank you. Where I got with honestly, once there was a Clerks 2, suddenly it felt like, one day we'll do a Clerks 3, because Clerks, it wasn't intended to be the first of something. It was intended to be just itself, right? But Clerks was about what I felt like it was like to be in my 20s. And then when we wound up making Clerks 2, that was what I felt like life was like in my 30s. And I was like, oh, crap, I could use this like, Michael Apps had used his 7 Up series, which is a documentary series where he checks in on these kids that, he shot at age 7, interviews with these kids at age 7, and every 7 years he's updated it. I think they're up to 49 up, or even more than that at this point. So I said, hey, I could do a fictional version of that where I could pop in on Dante and Randall and kind of use those characters to talk about whatever point in my life I'm at, because that's what Clerks was. So I always kind of had in the back of my head, the moment we talked about doing Clerks 3, that there would that there would definitely be a 3. Movies that are just dopey with trilogies and stuff. So Clerks is about being in your 20s. Clerks 2 is about being in your 30s. And Clerks 3 is about middle age and death. It's a funny movie, but it is very concerned with the end.
Oh, there you go. Let's go. From the Big O and Duke Show, Chad Dukes in D.C. Chad, how are you?
Oh, Erik show sounds great.
Thanks, man.
Doing wonderful. Kevin, tremendous fan of yours. The fact that your motor allows you to be successful kind of outside the machine and impose your will on people is very, very impressive. So,
I feel like Darth Vader right there. I'm imposing my will on motherfuckers. But thank you, sir. Yeah, I like being outside the machine. I've been in it, and I've been outside it, and both are great, and there's more money in the machine, but there's freedom outside the machine.
Yeah, and you're kind of like Blade. You walk in both worlds, and you're tremendous.
Nobody has ever said that. Nobody's ever said you're quite like Blade.
I'm a huge fan of yours. I'm also a huge fan of Adam Carolla's, and I know that you guys had a pretty epic dust-up on his podcast, and you actually did something that nobody does, and you walked into the Lion's Den and went into his building, and you guys had it out pretty good. And I'm a big fan.
And that honestly was out of like respect. Like I know, he's like, Kevin screwed me over. He has his position, I have mine. But regardless of whether we saw eye to eye, this was a guy who, like, I looked up to. You know what I'm saying? And you want to talk about one of those self-starters, he's one of those guys as well. So while that was going on, you never want beef with anybody. But while it was going on, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then I was like, you know what? Just go talk to him. Like, you have your perspective, he has his. But you can sit there from either sides of town and say it on different shows, or you can just go to, he's never going to come to you, so go to his place. And he was good about it. Like, I hit him up, and I was like, hey, man, can I come in? He goes, you sure you want to do that? And I said, absolutely. And right the day of, he gave me another chance to get out. He was just like, you don't have to do this. And I was like, no, dude, I want to do it. So we came over, and it's a pretty interesting listen. I mean, at the end of the day, I haven't heard it since we recorded it, but what I remember was we both wound up sounding like two little rich boys who had a fight. You know what I'm saying? Like, in the moment, I'm justified. But when the show was done, I got in the car with Megan, and I was like, "What? How was it?" She's like, "Oh, it was good, but you both sound spoiled." She's going, she goes, "The whole thing comes down to two grown men who wouldn't pick up the phone to call one another because each of you was like, well, he's got to call me."
I know what that's like.
Yeah, it was, and that was really that was a bummer, man, in retrospect. But sometimes you can't control what happens. I mean, I'm sure he'll tell you I could have controlled this by going forward with the show or something like that, but it wasn't strictly my call, and so everything went very weird and stuff. But I felt like I'm going to go in, even though I know he hates my guts now forever and stuff. I felt like I got to go in and talk to him about it. And not because this will be great radio, but more because I've always liked this guy. I like the cut of his jib, as they say. I like the fact that the dude is self-made. I like he talks about what he talks about and stuff. Our political views are vastly different, but he's one of those guys. He's one of us, and I know he'd be horrified to hear me say one of us because he don't like me, but I like people like that. So that, honestly, as much as that moment sucked, it was a little heartbreaking because I'm like, God damn it, I like that guy, and now he don't like me, and sometimes it happens.
It's tremendous radio, though, and I think that's
it is.
That's what drew me to it. But the question I had for you was, is that where the relationship left? I mean, is there no relationship any longer? Do you guys not have contact with each other?
Yeah, but to be fair, it's not like we were buddies before that. I'd been on his show once or twice when he had the radio show out here, and I'd been on Love Lines years prior, I think, when he was still there with Dr. Drew. But no, it's not like, there goes my bestie. I saw the dude very irregularly or infrequently, and now even less so from time to time. But, he's that's honestly something I'll always kind of regret, the fact that there's that falling out. And again, I know he would be like, well, we had it because of you, but regardless, I kind of bums me out.
The result was great radio. You keep killing vampires with Whistler, sir. I appreciate it.
You rock, dude. Oh, my God. I wish I had a radio show so you could call me every morning and be like, keep it up.
Later.
All right. There we go. Kevin, we have hit the end of the program here. Thank you so much for calling in. We do the show every week. If you're in New York, if you have the time, please come by. I'd love to have you in studio, and I know you're busy.
Oh, in a heartbeat, dude. If I'm there, you can hear me. I like hearing the sound of my own voice and stuff. So, and especially if I could bring Johnson along, that's my dream, man. We do a podcast every once in a while called Wybry,
yeah.
Which we've yet to put out all the episodes. We've been collecting them all and stuff. But that, to me, is one of my favorite podcasts on the planet because that's when you see that show, that's the original Dante and Randall sitting next to each other talking. I was Dante, and he was very much Randall. That's why that character Randall is so cool. Coolest character I ever created or will ever create and stuff. Everyone knows Jay and Silent Bob, but I didn't create Jay. Jay was Jay. I did create Silent Bob. But the character that I created that people most identify with and probably the most beloved character I ever created was Randall Graves, still to this day, the blonde-headed clerk from the video store in Clerks. And that character is strictly 100% Bryan Johnson in that era of my life. So he is exactly like Randall. So when you watch or hear Wybry, that is where Clerks came from. Me and Bryan sitting in the convenience store or at the video store doing anything we could to not work, talking about anything we could so that we didn't think, oh my God, we're stuck at fucking jobs, that we're better than this, and why aren't we doing more with our lives and stuff. So that show, man, being able to sit next to him and do that show is pure joy because it takes me way back to before the start of all this. And believe me, I like all this. I'm not complaining. I'm not like, I wish it was like it was in the old days. No, it's much easier to pay bills now in these days. But those were halcyon days. I was just figuring out who I was and what I wanted to say and whatnot, and sitting next to that dude every day, watching him interact with the public. That's where Randall came from. The idea of a clerk behind the counter is fuck all these people. That was Bryan Johnson, man. So, yeah, for me, this has been a blast sitting here listening to you guys. And anytime I'm coming, I'm going to drag Johnson with me.
Please do. Well, he may be here before you get here. So
no doubt.
Bryan and those guys have an open door policy to show up whenever they feel like. And the next time you're around, we'll have to do one of our big party shows where we have a lot of gourmet catered barbecue in the studio, fresh from the pitmasters themselves.
Oh my God! You don't even have to tempt me with food, but I'll come.
And by the way, I got to list you as an inspiration from the last time you were here on Opie and Jimmy. I'm on day 10 of No Sugar. I watched.
You watched Fed Up.
I watched Fed Up, and I watched this other film called That Sugar Film, back to back.
Sugar Film, yeah, that's also on. It's on Netflix now.
I don't advise anybody watching those back to back because you're terrified, but it got the point across, and I'm trying to see how long I can do this without having all the extra sugar in your life, and doing what you can. Excuse me, doing what you can with it.
It's a little hard in the first 2 weeks, particularly when because you realize how integral sugar is to the American diet, how much of it we consume on a regular basis. But once you can kind of eliminate it from your life, you create a different relationship with it. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know if it's this way for alcoholics or drug addicts and stuff, but I look at sugar now or brownie or cake, and I'm like, oh, that looks amazing. I want it, but I'm not going to eat it because I know where it's going to go and what it's going to do. And I always hit myself with this eye-opener or wake-up call. Anytime I want to, like I see something I want to eat and stuff, I just say to myself, you had your fun. Like, for years I ate whatever the fuck I want. I fucked sugar 6 ways to Sunday. I'm like, I found new ways to ingest sugar and shit. And so now, after 44 years of doing that, as I'm 45, I'm like, you had your fun. Like, you ate as much fucking cake as possible. You ate so much sweet that at one point you were like, I'm stuffed. And that happened all the time because the key building block of my diet wasn't protein, it was fucking sugar. So once I removed that, man, it just kind of falls off. And I only say it a lot for people because I know there are a bunch of people who, like me, are always like, man, how do you lose weight? Is it easy? And blah, blah, blah. Give me the easy way to do it. And I swear to you, of every way I've ever done in my entire life, this is the easiest way. The only difficult thing is it's like coming off of a drug because there's a lot of sugar in us, man. So for the first 2 weeks, you're going to get headaches, you're going to be depressed, your dopamine is going to crash into the toilet, man.
Okay, what you're saying here now, I was waiting for the headaches and the achiness, and it wasn't coming. So I was like, maybe I'm not doing this right, or maybe I'm not going to get that. But as last week's show, and Giddles here can attest to that, the emotional level of depression and anxiety and whatever was all over the place. Like, I'm sitting there like, why am I I'm about to start crying for no reason.
Erik was sitting there all antsy behind the mic, and every once in a while he'd get up and pace. I was like, what is going on with him? He's just losing his mind.
It was like when you see when they show you the don't do drugs videos where you see the little lab mice shadow boxing because they're going crazy on cocaine, stuff like that. I'm pacing, I'm grabbing the wall, I'm grabbing the desk, and I don't even realize I'm doing it. And I think that part is gone.
You texted me saying you felt like you were pregnant.
Yeah, I felt hormonal almost. I'm like, why am I turning into a girl here? Day 5, I told this story that I said, you know what, I'm doing good. I saw boxes of cereal in my pantry, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to smell it. And it was a box of blueberry frosted mini wheats.
You're just huffing it?
And I was like, I'm going to smell it. And then I got mad at myself and go, why am I doing this? And without even thinking, I punched the cereal box across the kitchen, and there's just cereal everywhere. And now I'm mad at myself because I was tempting myself, and now I got to clean it up. I was all over the place.
It's tough, man. It's emotional. Like, I was bereft, dude. Like, I was sitting around depressed, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't manufacture happy, and like I was so unfamiliar with the feeling. And my wife was like, it's because of the sugar. Like, all your dopamine was predicated on sugar. That's what, like, kept you happy and stuff. She said, that was tough for me to admit because I'm your wife and I should make you happy. She's going, but sugar was the thing. Sugar was the thing that, like, put a spring in your step every day. Hey, man, I got a shout out real quick before we go.
Yeah, sure.
There's a tweet from a dude named Nerd Church Podcast.
Right.
And he said, love Kevin Smith to death, but please remind him it's almost impossible to, quote-unquote, break into the biz. You have to know someone. I disagree. I'm not shouting this dude down and saying, you're wrong and dumb. I'm just saying I completely disagree, and that kind of fucking thinking doesn't allow for you to take a step toward art. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't think like that. Like, don't sit there and be like, I listened to all this, and the guy told me to record a podcast, but you got to know somebody to break into the business. Like, somebody else said to him, this dude Mercatron goes, yeah, it's kind of like basing your retirement on winning the lottery. No, dude, those are pipe dreams. Like, you can record a podcast and you do it for fun, and you keep doing it because you love the content, and it picks up an audience. It's just kind of the way it happens. But I know it's very easy for some people to be like, nah, you got to be famous and stuff like that. That's absolutely patently untrue. Don't listen to anybody who says something like that, kids, because fear is the mind killer. Dune taught us that many years ago and stuff. Don't let somebody kill your idea of fun or your willingness to kind of take a journey with what people will tell you is practicality. Like, oh, be realistic. That only happens to some people. All right, even if that's true, that it does happen to just some people, why the fuck not you? You know what I'm saying? Why them and why not you? So I'm telling you, as much as like Nerd Church Podcast, obviously he has his own podcast, so he definitely has an idea or two about the medium, but like, that's discouraging. Don't say that, dude. You can totally. I've watched it happen. I keep bringing this dude up as my main example. Harley Morenstein. He does Epic Mealtime. This was a dude who on YouTube. This is a dude who was a Quebec school teacher. Like, he would sit there, kids would come in, and the kids liked him because he's kind of young. He's very young and funny. He said, I was kind of teacher that I would set up the projector and pull down the screen, and so kids would come in the morning and be like, great, we're going to see a movie. And then he'd be like, okay, pop quiz. And then he'd give them a test, and the whole time they're like, aren't we going to see a movie? And he's like, why would you think that? You know, he just fucked around with them and stuff, funny stuff. So one day he said he was all drunk at night, he's making a pizza, he crumbled up some hamburger, put it on the pizza, and he shot it, and then he put it up on YouTube, got like 100,000 hits, and he says, so that day I realized I was an internet chef, even though he wasn't an internet chef, and he continued to build, and it became Epic Mealtime. Within 3 episodes, he said he had to quit school because the kids were like, I saw you on YouTube making food and stuff. And now the dude is on Forbes 30 under 30 list. He's one of the richest fucking entertainers come out of YouTube. And that dude didn't know anybody. He does now. Fuck, look at his Instagram. He knows everybody. But when he started, he was an English speaker in Quebec, about the furthest thing from the industry or showbiz as possible. And he broke in. I broke in. Like, I'm telling you, it happens. Don't be that person that's just like, I only have is some cats and it's a fraud. Don't be that person, man. Like, die trying to get in. You know, why? What's your alternative? Like, you just sit around in life and be like, that's for others. It was never meant for me. Why? You're here for a couple more decades, maybe. Every day it's worth trying. Every day you wake up, it's worth trying to make your stupidest dreams come true, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody in the process. So don't be that person that's just like, it only happens to some people. You got to be famous and stuff like that. I promise you. Take a step towards it's going to suck your dick.
Great advice from Kevin Smith there. Kevin, we are out of time. We do have to go. Thank you so much for calling in. Again, next time you're in New York, please come by, see Opie and Jimmy. Come by our show, whatever you can do.
Thanks, man. Good talking to you guys. Bye, Big.
See you later, Kev.